Can everybody see my first slide?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Yes.
I should be all right.
No.
So
Christian, good to see you.
yes, I can't. Hang on a minute. I should show myself. There we go. Yeah, there we are. That's better. Hello. So.
We still have a few seconds before we start the meeting, and I have to warn you that when we start the meeting, you'll all be muted except for the speakers. No, sorry, except when you are speaking. And these online meetings have advantages and disadvantages, and one of the disadvantages is that people are distracted very quickly. So one little trick that I can recommend is that you put your Zoom window on full screen. Now that we have screen sharing, that's not necessary, but
I usually put off my face anyway. I find it disturbing. So
well, I have that too when I'm sharing.
I'll do my presentation and I'll come back when the presentation is over. I will come back live again. All right. Yeah.
Very good. No problem at all. No problem at all. Oh, right.
Professor, may I take control for a second to show the agenda?
Yep.
Yep, I'll just take control for a second, Professor.
Should I stop sharing? Don't call me Professor. Too much.
Oh. Peter, over to you.
Who's fascinating Bhutan?
Gentlemen, I'm sorry, we do not have any ladies. I've never understood why numismatics is not interesting for ladies. But that's one of the mysteries of life, I suppose. I'd like to welcome you for the second part of our grand online event organized by World Coins. The welcome is also extended, of course, to members of ONS, members of Zeno, of Numismatique Française, and Facebook. That already gives you a bit of an idea of what I wanted to mention as the thing that determines, I believe, what we're going to do today, which I would call inclusiveness. It's the sort of thing that you need when you're fighting against COVID or against climate change. It's also called international cooperation. We have an audience that comes from everywhere on the globe, as well as speakers who come from everywhere on the globe. We cover several continents in the speeches and several countries. We cover not only coins, but also tokens, and on World of Coins, medals, decorations, banknotes, and of course, manhole covers. We have today in our speakers program academics as well as collectors, and that is one of the things I'm really proud of. These are two groups that I think ought to cooperate more, and if we can do our little thing, that would be great. Which gives me the perfect opening for our first and our keynote speaker, Dr. Shailendra Bandare. And this occasion reminds me of an event I was involved in a couple of decades ago, when there were trade talks between Hong Kong and the European Union. And Hong Kong was represented by a delegation that was led by an Englishman whose name I have long forgotten, I'm sorry to say. And the EU delegation was led by Mr. Pham Van Phi, who is of Vietnamese persuasion. So here you have a territory in Asia represented by a European and a country or a a group of countries in Europe represented by an Asian. Uh, that was good fun, but today we're going to top that because we now have an Indian person living in Europe speaking about Europeans living in India. So what do these two groups have in common? That actually is very easy because I met Shalindra Madare in a restaurant. And my answer to that question is both Europeans and Indians love Indian food. And with that thought and the pleasant company of Shalindra Bandare, I will leave you. Shalindra, you have the floor.
Thanks, thanks, Peter. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the keynote speaker on this occasion. It's always a joy to meet different sorts of audiences and speak to them. The talk is going to be an overview, really. I mean, it's not going to be something which is, I'm not going to, I mean, of course, there are some nice coins that one can see, but it is going to be an overview and introduction kind of talk, not highly academic or highly precise numismatic discoveries of any of that sort. So first of all, thanks, Peter, for giving the opportunity and also for the introduction. What I usually do in my presentations, of which in the past 6 months I've done many, is that I go off the screen. I'm sharing my screen and then I'll go off the screen. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll come back, as in I'll appear again on video and then take questions. So without much ado, I'm going to share the screen now. And somebody else is sharing its screen. So could you stop that, please? Hello? That's better. Thank you. So here we go. And I'm going to stop the video now and then just speak to my slides. There we are. Today's talk is going to be about Europeans in India. And by Europeans, as the current set of politics tells us, I'm going to exclude British out of this. So and that's not because of the current set of politics, obviously, but because British coinage in India is a completely different ball game, and it's a subject in its own right. So what we are going to do today is just to focus on Europeans in India, rather than who are not British, the other Europeans in India. And I'm going to sort of present, as I said at the beginning, kind of an overview between about 4 centuries or 3.5 centuries of that coin. So the intercourse between India and the West, as it were, has been quite a long story. I mean, we know as early as 500, 400 BC that there were Indians living in Athens, and Herodotus mentions them. And of course, there's this famous ancient interactive story of Alexander the Great arriving on the borders of India and then sort of leaving its imprint in a way. The Greeks and other sort of foreign people at that time were kind of referred to by this term Yavana by the Indians, and you have this kind of umbrella term. I mean, you can't really identify who exactly the Yavanas were, but they could be Romans, Scythians, Parthians, Egyptians, and even in the later medieval period, the term has been also used for Turks and even Europeans, for that matter. And they were of different professions. There were merchants, there were soldiers, there were settlers of various sorts. And as we sort of come out of the ancient period and during the Islamic period, the sort of post 1800-ish period, you have other ethnicities, particularly from the Middle East, Arabs, Jews, Armenians, Kurds, Persians, and also Ethiopians or Abyssinians, who sort of belong to this fold. Gradually, we have first-hand accounts of people who actually traveled to India. And that again goes back to the early centuries. I mean, St. Thomas, one of the first disciples of Jesus Christ, apparently ended up in India. And, you know, there are accounts of St. Thomas's travels to South India available in later chronicles. There was other Christian travelers such as Cosmas Indicopleostis, who was a sort of Levantine Greek, Hellenized Egyptian traveler. Then there was, of course, the more famous people like Marco Polo. And then in 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries, you have Niccolo Conti, Duarte Barbosa, Fernão Nunes, and Afanathi Nikitin, and the famous French jeweler, Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. So there was a whole load of people that we gather the interactive information from. But what really brings us into context with coins is, of course, when organized trade between Europe and, well, West and East kind of starts at this time. And through this age of mercantilism that sort of dawns in sort of after 16th century, you have other professional people like merchants, factors, soldiers, and then ultimately these emerge as also conquerors and colonizers. There's a distinct category of Europeans in India called of mercenaries, which come to prominence in the late medieval period, mainly the 18th and the 19th centuries. And in the colonial period, when, of course, the British were ruling India, of course, that does not mean that other Europeans completely stopped coming to India. There were artists, statesmen, administrators, proselytizers, and teachers from all walks of European life, as well as all parts of the European subcontinent, as a European continent, carried on coming and interacting with the Indians. The age of mercantilism that I mentioned was dominated by the political thought that profits through trade would add to wealth of the nation, of the country. So this was this sort of changed later on in Adam Smith's time to suggest that it was not only the profits through trade, but also manufacturing that added to the wealth of nations, of course, but that's 100 years later. But at this time, it was the lure of commodities that brought the Western gaze into India. And this little map shows what sort of commodities were being available for trading. And of course, some of these were extremely valuable commodities. They costed a lot in Europe than in India, or the parts of the Orient, as it were. For example, spices were really they were enough to generate profit that would actually pay for what was a very treacherous and very labor and cost intensive journey coming from Europe all along sort of the circumnavigating the coast of Africa, then entering the Indian Ocean, and then finally landing on the Western Indian coast. And the average life of a ship was so that it could only take about 2 or 3 of these voyages. So you can imagine how expensive it must be to run this risk, and in terms of both manpower as well as monetary value. But then the lure was so high that it was, of course, taken up by the companies. After the companies arrived in India, they started establishing their bases at various mainly coastal points. There were some inland bases as well. And these bases were generally referred to as factories. And these are not factories which are manufacturing factories, but of course, these are factories which are really, they're enclaves. And what was quite interesting about these enclaves is that they were governed by what is called as the principle of extraterritoriality. They were parts of those, they were treated as parts of those countries, which were sort of beyond their natural boundaries. And similarly, with from the viewpoint of the Indian rulers as well, although geographically these places were very much part of the Indian subcontinent, they were sequestered in terms of the outlook towards rule, as it were, and they were treated to be parts of different countries, as it were. So they were not, the reason why, for example, as we shall see later on, the Mughals were so anti allowing these Western companies to use their own name on their coins, was because they said, well, you're not part of our country, you are out of our rule, so you cannot really use our coins, and you cannot really have our name on your coins. So this was a kind of a distinction, and it was a very kind of unique distinction that happens at this point. Historically, it has been talked about quite a lot, what exactly the effects and outcomes of observing this principle of extraterritoriality was. And you can see that, most of these enclaves or factories or trading outposts, they are sort of established in 17th century. Some of them go a little bit in 16th century, but most of them are in 17th century. The Portuguese were the first to arrive, and they are a distinct entity here, because the Portuguese never were part of the mercantile. They were engaged in trade, but their trade was not carried as part of a company as such. So the trade, the enclave, the Portuguese possessions were very much treated as parts of Portugal itself, and they were ruled distinctly by and governed actually by directly from the king. So there was no intermediary, as in case of with French, Dutch, and British later involvement. Their control of the trade as well as the territories was very much a direct kind of control in the name of their king and as parts of the extra maritime presence of Portuguese. The two people that two guys that you see here were the most important ones, of course, Vasco da Gama, who in very soon after the discovery of, quote unquote, discovery of America by Columbus, he found this route to actually the seaward route to go to India by circumnavigating the southern tip of the African subcontinent. And once they got there, their main intention, as famously noted, was to find spices and Christians. Buscar cristãos e especiaria was the goal was. Spices were there, and quite surprisingly, they also found Christians were already there too. However, because they were different Christians than themselves, they sort of were inclined not to treat them as, identify them as Christians anyway. But that's a different story. But the main founder of the Portuguese Empire in India is the person that you see here on the right. He's Afonso de Albuquerque, and he in 1510 captured Goa, which became the preeminent Portuguese possession on the western coast of India. And then subsequently the Portuguese had presence into India all the way up to 1961. I always say that they were the first to arrive and the last to leave in amongst the Europeans that actually had a colonial presence in India. Quite soon, the other distinctive feature that the Portuguese practiced was that they issued coins of their own denomination standard. This is again something very different than the rest. The rest were actually interested in trade, so the rest were actually, they wanted a currency that was facilitating trade. So they were very keen to strike coins on the prevalent Indian standards, as it were. But the Portuguese, right from the word go, they were not really, because they saw that their presence was kind of an extension of their mother country, as it were. So they started issuing coins very earlier on, struck to their own standards. So there was a cruzado, and what you see down at the bottom is half manuel. Both these denominations are not really Indian denominations, and the designs also were very much a non-Indian kind of design. So you can see that the obverse of these coins has the astrolabe, which is part of the maritime empire status of Portuguese empire, as it were. And on the reverse, there are very much Christianity related symbols. But the top coin has a cross, and the lower coin has the royal crown with the word MEA or meia, which means half in Portuguese, inscribed on them. So right from the earlier period, they started issuing coins which were really very different and not conforming to the prevalent Indian standard. So that's what sets them apart. The other interesting aspect that sets them apart is right from the word go, Christianity plays a very important part in the design of Portuguese coins. And there are various saints that appear on these coins. So, for example, on the top right here, you see Saint Thomas, and this coin was actually called Sao Tom, which means Saint Thomas, and this was struck to again a standard that was prevalent in. But this was the first coin that was actually a sort of trade-related coin, because the denomination was very much similar to the Venetian ducats, the Ottoman bezants, or Suleiman the Magnificent's gold coins. So this was a kind of part of the Indian Ocean world currency that the Portuguese were taking part in, and that was the first coin that they struck into that particular regime. Similarly, on the coin on the top left, you see it says Saint I, and we don't know whether it's Saint I or Saint P. It is not very clear. It's either Saint Philippe or Saint John. And in case of other Portuguese coins, you see both the Saint John's. You have Saint John the Baptist as well as Saint John the Evangelist. So both these saints are shown on Portuguese coins. Later on in 18th and 19th century, the Portuguese coins do have not the direct representation of Christianity, but also a kind of indirect representation. So, for example, the cross always is there, and these crosses are typical and they are specific to orders that were created in Portugal. A lot of coin collectors do not know this, that these crosses are specific to orders. And for example, this particular cross, which has a sort of triangular heads, it's called the Cross of the Order of St. Thomas. Similarly, there is another cross which has crosslets. Each of the arms of the cross is another cross again. That is another order. So these are specific royal orders in Portugal. And those are represented on coins. And of course, these orders were deeply rooted in Christianity. So the connection of Christianity with Portuguese coins is again a very unique aspect of the coins that the Portuguese struck in India. The other, the ways that the Portuguese showed their sovereignty on their coins was, of course, to actually depict the rulers themselves and or their coats of arms. So, for example, on top right here, you have the Jewgate portrait of Don Pedro III and Dona Maria, who were the rulers in the late 18th century. And by this time, the Portuguese had realized that they have to strike coins to the local standard, although they're still not striking coins that look like Indian coins. The appearance of these coins is very different. And so their circulation was rather limited. The other interesting aspect that one sees, particularly on the top left coin here, is there is a whole range of Portuguese coins where the name of the king and the depiction of the saint, as I said, I showed in the previous slides, is actually, there's a correspondence between them. So for example, if the name of the king is Jean or João, then the corresponding reverse figure is of Saint John. If the name of the king is Philippe, then the reverse figure is of Saint Philip. If the name of the king is Sebastião, then the reverse figure is of Saint Sebastian. So this kind of interesting correspondence between the name of the ruler and the depiction of the saint is a very interesting and unique feature. And that sort of links up this whole concept of having Christian motives, then connecting it to sovereignty as well. So there are two aspects about sovereignty that are coming together in this particular fashion. There are individual coats of arms. So on the coins of Pedro and Dona Maria, what you see on the reverse is the individual coats of arms of that particular ruler, these rulers, but also there were the colonial arms. And that's what you see in the last coin, the copper coin, the half tanga coin, which is at the lower right-hand side. And there, the coats of arms are actually the arms of the colony itself, of Estado da India, which was, as I said, an extension of, it was called the Indian state of the Portuguese Empire. And what you see in the middle is the arms of that particular colony. They're not exactly the royal arms of Portugal. There are interesting examples of portraiture as well. I mean, the top portraits are, the Jugate portrait is very much into, engraved in a sort of local Indian fashion. I'm sure that the engravers for these coins were local engravers. They probably saw some very realistic paintings of these rulers, and then sort of composed the coin design from that. Whereas in middle of 19th century, of course, the main model of showing the rulers was by far the most famous portrait of Queen Victoria. And this is exactly what you see here, copied for the portrait of Maria II as well. I mean, Victoria became the sort of paradigm for royal depiction in Europe as well. I mean, lots of queens sort of showed themselves similarly looking or similarly attired to Victoria, just as a matter of fashion. And this is again what you see on these coins as well. The Portuguese were also instituted a paper currency, and this is just an example of one of the last issues. This was in 1959. Just only about 2 years before the Portuguese were booted out of Goa. And this is a modern banknote, as it were, of a denomination of 1,000 escudos. And this was an interesting denomination because the Portuguese currency at this time was kind of tied of making 6 escudos equivalent to a rupee. So this is even though the note is of 1,000 escudos in rupee terms, it's not exactly a full denomination. For the same reason, you have fractions. You have a 600 escudo note, which is of 100 rupees. You have a 300 escudo note, which is of 50 rupees. So what is also interesting here is that it has, for the first time on the language panel in the center, you have the value expressed in 4 languages. So there is Marathi, which says 1,000 escudos. There is 1,000 escudo, which is written in Urdu or Farsi. Then there is 1,000 escudos written in Gujarati. And the last language is actually 1,000 escudos written in Konkani. And this is the first time ever that the local language of Goa is given a place as an independent language onto these banknotes. And this is a very interesting linguistic feature that feeds these notes into a history of language politics in the region at this time. So from that point of view, these notes haven't really been deployed into the wider body of evidence with regard to these particular politics. But this is where you find, for the first time, you see that there is a separate language called Konkani appearing on banknotes in its own rights. So that's sort of, that sort of finishes us with Portuguese, and I separated the Portuguese because they are not part of the other Europeans, which mainly were the mercantile companies in what is now regarded as the age of the sail. This was the sailing companies, and this is a list that tells you the names of the companies and the establishment of their first enclave. So the English East India Company was established in 1600, and after a lot of efforts in 1612, they got the permission from Jahangir to establish an outpost at Surat. So that was the first outpost that was established by a company here. The Dutch Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie was established in 1602, very much on the heels of the British East India Company. And of course, the English and the Dutch were the main rivals, the main early rivals at this time. And their base was actually established at Machilipatnam in 1605. Then followed the Danish, which was 1616. And as always, the French were the last, and they did not form their company until 1642. And by the time they actually got to establish an enclave, that was 1668. So, there was a big kind of majorly half a decade, half a century later than the rest of the Europeans who were actually already in trade. Apart from these rather famous and companies that are known better to numismatists, coin collectors, because they actually have coins, there were other East India companies also. And for example, there was an Ostend company, which was an Austrian company that was established in 1715. And there was also a Swedish East India company, which was established in 1731. Both these companies were also very much trading companies in the same fashion as these others were. But their focus was more in trading in Chinese and Japanese commodities rather than Indian. So their presence in India is not really very much of any import. But the English, the Dutch, the Danish, and the French were the main companies that were connected to India. One interesting story, apart from the fact that these companies, struck their own coins and they were interested in trade, is that they were also instrumental in the global trade in what is called as monetary exchange media. So they were into the trade of metals and other monetary media, such as cowries, for example. And that facilitated the movement of these media across the globe. And this is, again, a very interesting phenomenon that has been studied in depth by historians and economic historians such as Frank Perlin, that how the agencies of these companies ended up in creating these networks of disseminating various monetary exchange media. And of course, as far as coins were concerned, the main monetary exchange media is metals. So you have gold, and you have silver, and you have copper, and these metallic objects or sources themselves became trade commodities, because there was a market for these commodities in India as much as there was in other parts of the Orient, because these were the metals that were really not available readily in sources, or when by this time the natural sources had already been exhausted. So there was a demand for these metals in this part of the world. So we have, for example, the copper from Sweden. That particular plate that I illustrate here is actually discovered out of a shipwreck that was discovered just off the coast in the Bay of Bengal, just off the coast of near Madras or Chennai. So there was a demand for copper, particularly in India at this time. And also the silvers that was being imported was very important, because at both China and India were very much silver consuming economies at this time. And quite fortuitously, the Europeans had access to the New World silver that was being mined in South America at this time. So here we get this chain of the South American silver then getting shipped to Europe, and from Europe it's coined and then shipped to the East, where it is consumed and spent against buying luxury items like spices. The fact that the Mughals could base their extremely big and voluminous currency on silver was due to the fact that there was a lot of silver being emptied into the Indian market through the companies and through their trading networks. And down below at the bottom, there's an example of a bar or an ingot, which has an impression of the VOC, or the Dutch East India Company Bijlmark. So the dollar, the ducat, and Swedish plate copper became very much the form of the imported bullion that was coming in through to trade into the Indian markets. As a result of this, when the companies realized that there was a demand for silver, and it has to be attested silver, it just can't be bars, because if silver is actually existing in pre-coined form, then it has a particular attestation, it has a particular legitimacy. So that spurred a kind of a spurt in the production of what was called as trade coinages. So these coins were struck specifically for trading with the East, and so that they could be taken to the East, and then they could be exchanged there in lieu of local currencies. There are three examples. The Elizabeth first trade coinage, also called portcullis money, because of the depiction on the reverse, and it's an 8 testern or a dollar coin. The Dutch ducatoon, or Daalder, as it was called, and this is from the Mint of Gelderland. And of course, the Danish Specietaler. Both the Danish as well as the Dutch actually bear the insignias of their respective companies on their coins. So you see VOC down below by the underneath the shield on the Danish coin, and DOC, the Dansk Ostindisk Compagnie, mentioned under the little coronet below the royal cipher of King Christian V, which is on the top. So this is another interesting phenomenon that was spurred by the demand for silver that existed in the Indian markets. The Dutch, as I said, were originally established in 1602 in Machilipattan. From there, their main focus of activities was on the eastern coast, and the fact that they were competing heavily with the British or the English at this time meant that they concentrated their activities mainly on the eastern coast. So this is a very beautiful painting of the Dutch East Indias Company factory at Hooghly and their respective coats of arms. The Dutch coinage, as I said, because they were speaking to both these kind of, there was an eastern side and a western side. The eastern side coinage derived from the traditions that were prevalent on the eastern coast of India, and the western coast had its own coinage tradition. So for example, there were tin and sort of low value metallic coins of tin or zinc that were called bazarukos, which were circulating on the western coast of India. And the Dutch then sort of partook in the issue of these currencies of the bazarukos. Also, they were heavily reliant on reusing local coins. So that is on the top right here is an example of a Iranian coin, which is being counterstruck on the reverse, which says VOC, and there's a little C so a little P on above that, which means Pulicat, and this was counterstruck for local and trade usage in the Dutch enclave at Pulicat in Tamil Nadu. Then the Dutch, of course, embarked on actually striking a vast coinage that was only for trade. And this, as I said, making coins itself was a commodity, and selling coins, and that was itself a kind of an avenue to generate profit. And because the main objective of these companies was to make profit, they of course partook in every sort of opportunity that actually made them profit. So the gold pagodas that the Dutch produced at Nagapattinam, their primary enclave on the eastern coast of India, became a very major trade coin at this time, and the Dutch earned quite a lot of profit with their manufacture. And these coins were based on the design of Vijayanagar Empire. On what obverse you see a standing figure of Venkatesha, or the god is a form of Vishnu, and on the reverse there is this interesting design feature of a granulated field, and this was actually made within the die itself. So it was an interesting way of, it actually enhanced the manufacturing rate of these coins, so they could be produced more quickly because of this granulated reverse feature. So the Dutch partook the Dutch history of coins, which has of course been very well illustrated and studied by the wonderful book by Scholten, is a very important and interesting aspect of European coins in India. The Danes came in the middle of 17th century, and again, much like the other Europeans, they also have coins which are quite unique in a way. There were only two Danish settlements. One was in Bengal and the Srirampur, and the major one was Trankebar, or as it's called Tharangambadi in Tamil, on the Tamil coast, just to the south of Pondicherry, which we will come to in a minute. And this was a settlement that took a lot of a big hit in the Boxing Day tsunami a few years ago. But even as you can see, it's kind of preserved. It sort of weathered that particular storm, and it's been preserved very well. There's a fort there which is called Dansborg, and just behind this fort there is a cemetery. And on if you come, if you see where the picture is taken from, besides, there is a colonial street, and on the other side there is the house of the Danish governor, which has now become a heritage hotel. So it's a great place to spend a few days. And when I went there several years ago, about 25 years ago, this pile of rocks was not there. This is post the tsunami effect. There was a big beach, and I could see that people were actually looking for coins in the sand, and they were actually also finding some. So it was, this is how the Danish Indian coins were found. A unique feature of the very early Danish coins in India was that they actually bear the name of the ship that the particular ship that was bringing in the metal that was being used for these coins. And this was probably due to the fact that there was some need of accounting and how much metal was brought in and how much metal was spent in actually making the coins. So you can see that there is Perlen written on the reverse of the Santa Ana and also Saint Michael, and there are a number of ship names that are known from on these coins. On the obverse, they have something to do with Danish sovereignty. For example, the top two coins have the name of the fort Dansborg written on the obverse, and the lower coin has the cipher or the emblem of Christian IV. But on the reverse, there are the names of these ships, and this is a very interesting phenomenon whereby it's a microcosm of the study of metal being imported and coins being struck. And a lot of this research has been was done by Uno Berger Jansen in his books on very useful and very important books on Danish coins in India. Much like the Dutch, the Danish also partook in the trade of issuing these Nagapattinam pagodas, and these were the major trade coins. Of course, the excuse me, the Danish presence being much smaller than either the Dutch or the French presence, their operations were also very much limited. And that is perhaps one of the rarest colonial coins of India that you see here. It's the same granulated surface, but within the granulated surface, there is the cipher of King Christian, the 7th C7 monogram, which is there. And on the obverse, there is the depiction of Venkatesha, the form of Vishnu, very much similar to what we saw on the Dutch coins. There was a kind of a quadrimetallic currency here. There was the gold coins exclusively for trade, but the silver coins were called royalins or fanons, and copper coins were called in the South Indian system as cash or kas. So there were 3 copper denominations that were struck. There was 1 kas, 4 kas, and 10 kas. This is an example of the 10 kas. Similarly, there were lead caches that were very much similar to the caches that I showed in the previous slide, which had the names of the company on them. This is a lead cache showing the angel, the lamb of the god, and the monogram for Frederick III, the Danish king. Similarly, here there is the Norse lion on with an axe on the reverse, and on the obverse there is the symbol of Christian VI. This is 1731. So the design of these coins were pretty much the same. On one side there is the royal cipher of the king, and on the reverse there is either the denomination or some sort of symbolism associated either with Scandinavia or with Christianity in this kind of fashion. The Portuguese, the French, the last ones, actually wielded a lot of importance. I mean, French, after the initial rivalry between the Dutch and the British subsided, and the Dutch sort of then took off to concentrate further on the East, and they concentrated more on Dutch East Indies and Indonesia, leaving the British sort of, in India on their own. The French rivalry with Britain was very much, and at one point the French became a dominating political force in the Deccan, particularly in the south. But gradually, because of various reasons, such as the waning French influence in the 100 Years' War in Europe, also the French Revolution, the French presence then subsequently came to having only about 5 enclaves in India, and they were liberated in the 1950s. But the French influence still very much continues. Those are the arms of the French East India Company. And you can see that there's a nice little picture of a French or Indian policeman from Pondicherry. They still wear the French gendarme caps. So there is very much French influence still existing in, although I believe that there is a move that this particular uniform now has to be sort of decolonized and changed into something different, which is a shame. But anyway, at least when I was there, this was what I saw. The French coinage again is trimetallic, and again, much like the Dutch and the Danish, the French also issued their own pagodas mainly for trading purposes, because there was a huge market for these pagodas. And here again, this is a kind of a derivative type of the same Vijayanagar prototype, having instead of 1 figure on the obverse, now there are 3 figures. So Venkatesha, the Vishnu, is then flanked by his 2 consorts, Shri Devi and Bhudevi on either side. And generally, these were called swamis. It was not exactly a swami, but they were referred to as, in colloquial parlance, as swamis. So this is called a 3 swami design, whereas the earlier ones was called a 1 swami, or just a swami design. And again, here on the reverse, there is a little crescent mark, and that was again a mark that was associated with the French. The silver currency, much like the Danish coins, was also called fanon. So this is a depiction of the French fanon. Here again, there are no inscriptions, but there is some emblems of French royalty here. There is the French crown, and on the reverse there is the symbol of the Bourbon dynasty, the 5 iris flowers, the fleur de lis, that you can see here. The copper coins were called dudu, which is a local term for cash. It just means money or change. So, and this is an exceptional example, which is from the collection of the American Numismatic Society, which is a full flan. You don't get these coins struck to this kind of high standards of perfection. But obviously, these must have been an especially struck coin for presentation or for approval purposes. And again, on the obverse, there is the flower of iris, the emblem, the French emblem, and on the reverse is inscription outlining the name of the place where they were made, and it says Puducherry in Tamil. The French also issued their own banknotes, and they were mediated through the Banque de l'Indochine. And there is a whole range of these banknotes which were circulating. Banque de l'Indochine was also responsible for issuing banknotes in other French or Oriental colonies, particularly French Indochina, which is today's Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. So the same bank were issuing notes there as well. However, the denominations were different. The Indian French notes were denominated in rupees, whereas the other notes from the further east were denominated in piastres. So the French also issued their own paper currency, as it were, in India. The fact that most trading companies needed a money that was readily accepted meant that they struck coins that looked very much like Indian coins, and they were issued mainly in the name of the British of the Mughal emperor. The major currency at this time that was become very popular and everybody tried to emulate it was the French rupee, which was struck with the name Arcot because the permission for issuing these coins was originally had from the Nawab of Arcot. And this was the Arcot rupee that was struck in Pondicherry, but with the mint name Arcot, and with that same crescent mark that you see on the reverse just next to the regalier here. Similarly, the Dutch had their own mint at Jagannathpur. This is a classic example of a rupee which is absolutely matching in all shapes, sizes, everything design with the Mughal or Nawab's rupees at Machilipattan, which was just across the body of water that separated the two places, Jagannathpur and Machilipattan. And these were actually struck looking exactly very much similar to the Machilipattan rupees. The last coin here is quite rare, and recently Jan Lingen has viewed the mark of D as the mark of the French governor Duplay. I have difference of opinion about that, but you know, what is life without having different opinions about attributing coins? It's quite fun. So in my view, this is the D stands very much for Denmark, and it's a modification of the French rupee. You can see that the two rupees are extremely close to each other. However, there is a very telltale difference where the top line has the word Ahmad Shah Bahadur. It's supposed to be struck in the name of Ahmad Shah Bahadur. And the word Bahadur is misengraved. It's only Baha, and the rest is then just left. Quite interestingly, also where the regnal year, where the Hijri date should be on these coins, you see the regnal year 7. It is on the reverse as well, but also on the obverse at the top. The category of Europeans issuing coins is, of course, not only limited to the companies and their mercantile activities. There were many European mercenaries operating in India. And these are just a few examples of mercenary who sort of established their own fiefdoms or their own kingdoms even, and they issued these coins. So for example, Jan Willem Hessing was a Dutch officer who was serving the Scindias, and he was appointed as the governor of Gwalior, at Agra. And in about early 19th century, he struck coins with his initials JWH written on them. Sanjay Garg, who's in the audience today, has written a fantastic article about the numismatic activities of Jan Willem Hessing. So, and it's published in the Numismatic Digest. The interested people it's well worth a read, a very in-depth and very complete study of Hessing's coins. The other person whose coins are much, much rarer is the George Thomas, who was Irish, and he was originally from Tipperary in Ireland, but he established his own kingdom in this place called Hansi and Hisar, and then he was called the Irish Raja. And quite poetically, he renamed, he sort of invented an Islam, a sort of Farsi Hindustani alias for Hansi, and it was called Sahibabad. It was the city of the Sahib. And this is a rupee from the British Museum's collection, very, very rare. That has the mint Sahibabad Hansi on the top. Jean-Baptiste Filloz, who was a Frenchman of uncertain origins, whose coinage I have discussed in one of my papers published in the Oriental Numismatic Society's journal. And he was his main job, his importance was to run an artillery command for the Scindias, and as a result of that, he issued coins with the cannon as his own mint mark. And this is a coin issued from his own fief, which was a town called Shirpur, which is in eastern Madhya Pradesh, near the border of Rajasthan. and the coins that were struck by Philos. But Philos also operated other mints such as Chanderi and Isagad and other places in the heart of India in central Madhya Pradesh. So Philos has its own coinage history, as it were. So this is where I would like to stop. But lastly, there is this particular slide that shows you how the import of Venetian coins, again only through trade, then sort of resulted in making their Indian impressions or Indian copies. And this was mainly because the coins themselves were very, very reliable in terms of their gold contents, but also because they had this kind of very interesting, unique design, which had, I mean, there's an example of Andrea Dandolo, who was the Doge of Venice. And you see that on the obverse, there is Saint Mark, who's giving a standard to a kneeling Doge. And on the reverse, there is Christ Pantocrator in a mandorla, which is a kind of almond-shaped celestial enclosure. So he's ruling from the heavens. And this particular design became very, very popular in India, and then it spurred on its own Indian version. So in this big set of Indian imitations, the one on the top right, you can see that the figures of the Doge and Saint Mark have morphed into Krishna and his consort Radha. So the Krishna and Radha are having a playful dalliance, as it were, on the top. And on the reverse, Christ then becomes the Indian god Vithoba, which is mainly a very popular deity in the Deccan, particularly in Maharashtra. And that's what you see on the figure there. It's Vithoba with his hands held characteristically akimbo on his hips. And that's what he represented as. So it's a very interesting story of how these visual elements change. Some of these tokens, such as the one on the top here, top left-hand side, the small token with scalloped kind of edge, were actually manufactured in Britain. And this is a man called John Cook, who was running a company of making these tokens in brass, so they could be made in bulk and then exported to the East for actually making jewelry. I mean, this was not a monetary use at all. These were brass tokens. But however, the popularity of these designs in jewelry as well as in tokens was due to the fact that originally the designs were considered as very exotic, and the kind of trust that these coins had in terms of their purity, then sort of matched with what they depicted, and it is sort of those two sort of things go hand in hand, as it were, and then the whole design becomes extremely popular and reliable. So this is the overview that I would like to stop at, and sort of about 350 years of overview of Europeans in India in terms of numismatics and other activities as well. So I will now stop the screen share, and then we'll look at the questions and comments that have appeared in the chat box. Many thanks, and again, thanks, Peter, for inviting me to do this keynote address. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sharon. That
Here we
was
are. So I'm back in vision. So
yes, we're glad to see your face again. I have a preliminary little remark actually on the questions, which
right.
is that recent research has shown the importance of metal trading between Europe and Asia, and in particular with China, Japan, and India. The reason for that is that in Asia, the relation between gold and silver was fixed, whereas no, it was explicitly fixed in China. And though I haven't seen any concrete evidence, I believe that they maintained that it was implicitly fixed in India because of the weight of the coins. And in Europe, the relation between gold and silver was, of course, not fixed. We all know the story of the sovereign that could be worth a varying amount of silver in the shape of coins. The objects that you've shown, like bars and coins, show both gold and silver, but am I right in presuming that silver is prevalent in these objects and that gold has a more modest place? And now I am excluding the coins that were struck locally, as they may have had a sort of a different standard.
The quick answer to that is that these patterns keep on changing. I mean, as the demand and supply equations for these metals kept on changing over decades as well as centuries. So things were different at different times. So in 17th century, you find that there is, a general lack of copper. So actually trading in copper is quite profitable. But at the same time, you also find that, the Dutch, at this time only the Dutch have the monopoly of trading with Japan, which is the major producer of copper. And the whole thing then changes in late 18th century when more copper becomes available through British mines in Cornwall, also Swedish mines. The whole episode about the Swedish plate money being demonetized in the middle of 18th century has a major impact, because then everything gets shipped over to the east. So the dynamics of these metallic trades keep on changing quite a lot. So there is not one point where you see gold is prominent or silver is prominent. It's at different points and at different places. These things get consumed in different ways. So the flow and the dynamics is very different.
Thank you. Sanjay Garg has posted a reference. I'm not sure
that's good.
what the reference refers to, but Sanjay, can you give us a bit of a flavor of what this particular reference is about?
This is the reference to his article that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Of coins of Jan Willem Hessing. Yeah. Sanjay, you want to say something?
No, just wanted to add, it was mentioned by Shailen, and it is a joint article which I wrote with John Lingon. And anyone interested can refer to this article.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question. Can you read it on the chat, or shall I read it?
Yeah, I can. It's Anand Kothari asking, was the trade tokens of the same weight issued by all the Europeans in India? I'm not sure. What does that mean? What is exactly trade tokens? What do you mean by trade tokens?
I meant, hi, Anand Kothari here.
Yeah, hi.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Go on.
Okay. I mean, the weight of the gold or the silver trade coins, or the tokens issued for trade.
You have to say the trade coins. Okay. I got you. They were not exactly tokens. They were proper coins. They were weighing. Basically, the most popular denomination in this trade was the Spanish piece of 8, or what was called as the dollar. So they were also all issued on the same weight standard. Yes. Yeah. So they were all very much, there might be a slight variations, but they were very much by and large close to the piece of 8 weight standard.
Thank you.
Then Priyesh Kikan he's asking, why is it that the European powers never minted the coins in the name of their sovereign, but rather the rulers of that time? Was it fear or any other reasons? No. This was, as I said at the beginning, there were 2 reasons for this. Well, I mean, as I outlined, there was, not all European powers. I mean, the Portuguese did issue coins in the name of their own sovereign. It was only these companies that they issued coin. They tried to issue coins in their own name, such as the British tried to issue the coins have the coins in the name of their own company before when they started the mint at Bombay, for example. But they were not really very popular because they looked very different. I mean, people will not trust them. So, and that is, almost like a paradox to a trading company, that they can't really trade because their coins are not worthy of acceptance. Also, the fact that they were forced to change these coins into Mughal coins was actually cutting into their profit. I mean, it's hard economics that is at play here. It's not fear or any other sort of. There is no rhetorical reason for this. There are very much practical issues at stake. So, they wanted to have their coins looking like Mughal coins because they wanted them to be acceptable in trade so that they can carry on going on about their business. So that was the main reason. Diniar, what was the weight of the Spanish piece of 8? It was about around 24 grams. Around. I mean, it varies a little bit here and there. Was the weight of the piece of 8 much different from the Indian rupees? Yes, it was almost the double rupee. So when later on, when the price had sunk a little bit, as famously in late 19th century, late 18th, well, early 19th century, when the Arcot double rupees was struck by the British, they actually converted the Spanish coin straight into a double rupee because at that time the exchange rate was pretty much as 1:2. What is this? There seems to be, Anthony asking, there seems to be a relative scarcity of Western trading posts in northwestern coastal areas on your map. Is this true? And did this have specific reasons? Well, I mean, the main reason on that was that the domination of the port of Surat, which was very much a preeminent Mughal port, and in 16, particularly when the companies were trying to find a foothold, this was what was dominating the scenario at this time. So that is the reason why there was not much sense. They could actually use the port of Surat very much like any other port, and they had offices in Surat itself to carry on the trade. So the main reason why there was not into that particular part of the world was, but they were outposts. I mean, they were not exactly enclaves. For example, there were outposts in harbors like Goga in Gujarat. Diu was a very important site. So yeah, there were places in sort of northern part of the western coast. But that seems to be the main reason why they were not, is mainly seems to be eclipsed by the fact that Surat was such a dominant port at this time.
So, if I can add a little comment to that comment of yours, the port of Surat actually had a monopoly on trade, which was given by the Mughals, maintained by the Mughals. And if Western ships would unload in another port, they would actually have to pay for the officials to go to the other port and have the
absolutely So this was actually the reason. So yeah. So I mean, this was.
You're quite right. That was a very important reason. But I think there is a second reason which should not be ignored, which is that the more north you came on both sides of the Indian subcontinent, the more the higher the chances were that you would run into local pirates. Piracy was less important in the south, because you could come out of nowhere and then suddenly appear in a port, whereas in the north you had much less room of maneuver.
Piracy is definitely a very much a topic of discussion in its own right, and how it operated and what exactly was going on. I mean, there's this fantastic guy called Henry Avery, who's operating in late 17th century, who is absolute amazing. I mean, the character of Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean was based on him. So there is that as well. I mean, yes, but that's quite a different interesting issue as well. So
we have a new question that has come in.
Can you please throw some more light on this William and Mary coin of Bombay presidency? Why was it ordered to be melted by Aurangzeb? Well, as I said, the whole basis of this discussion was because from Aurangzeb's viewpoint, the British were not supposed to strike coins looking like his coins because they were not his subjects. So he would say, why are you doing this? You're not within your rights to do this. If you were actually subservient to me, if you're part of my kingdom, then of course you can do it, but you're not. And the other reason was that because is that there were particular circumstantial happenings going around at this time that actually frankly, Aurangzeb would not have been bothered about these coins at all had they not been shown to him. So, and why they were shown to him was because of this chap who I just mentioned, Henry Avery, had the nerve to actually loot a ship that actually belonged to Aurangzeb himself. And when, and because Henry Avery was British, the entire blame came onto the British, and they sent a delegation to Bombay to discuss about what should be done about this. And this whole episode, the toings and froings that were the petitions that were being made as part of this episode meant that the coins were shown to Aurangzeb as, look, there is this another, these people are getting too smart. They are not controlling these piracies. And hey, here are some coins that they strike. So they were actually sort of shown to him as an extra point. And that's the reason why he became aware of them. And that then he asked them to stop them, basically. So that was the thing.
Well, we have run out of time and out of questions, which is a happy coincidence. This has been absolutely wonderful, and
somebody saying the name of the mint in VOC coin, VOC P coin, VOC N coin. Well, VOC C is Colombo, P is Pulicat, and N is Nagapattinam. And there is I also, which is Jaffna, and there is G, which is Gal, or Gaul, as they call it.
And another one.
Was it possible for the European companies to mint gold and silver coins when they were newly establishing them? No. I mean, the quick answer is no. They could partake into this particular trade of gold coins only in 18th century. That was the main time when they did. I mean, we have enough documentary evidence to suggest that the British in Bombay, for example, were not able to issue gold coins well into the middle of 18th century, even though they were present and they had a functioning mint. So, and there were reasons for this as well, because gold was actually a store of value, not used as day-to-day currency metal, whereas silver was mainly used to pay troops, etc. So that had a particular currency or monetary role in terms of circulation. So it was not really even profitable to actually issue gold coins unless they themselves were trading commodities, and then they could actually, the mint could be run for a seigniorage and a profit to make the gold coins itself. So earlier on, there was no incentive to actually strike gold coins.
Thank you. I'm going to try again. I would like to thank you very much for this contribution. You are a real keynote speaker. We have a program to continue with, but as I mentioned before, concentration is a bit of a problem with this sort of meeting. So I propose that we have a little pause now. We've called it a toilet pause.
Okay.
We'll be back in 3 minutes when I will give the floor to Yigit, who will talk to you about very different things, interesting as well.
Well, thank you. I'll pop in and out. I'm going to be present in the meeting, but I'll keep on popping in and out. Thank you so much.